Heads up, this podcast isn't therapy. It's bold, blunt, and irreverent, but it's not a substitute for professional help. Full disclaimer is in the blurb below. Hey, welcome to Path Alchemy. So today we're going to be stepping into the uncomfortable truth about emotional cheating. So not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that happens in texts, glances, fantasy, and the spaces that people pretend don't count. So I'm going to talk about it, all of it. So why do people emotionally cheat? What are they seeking, often unconsciously, when they decide to emotionally reroute themselves? So we could be talking about unmet emotional needs in their primary relationship. Perhaps they feel unseen, misunderstood, or emotionally neglected. If they're no longer confiding in their partner, or if they're being confided in, something is missing. Perhaps they're seeking novelty, admiration, or comfort elsewhere. Oftentimes people will say, oh, well, he listens to me, or she makes me feel interesting again. So what's this about? Essentially a lack of internal boundaries. Some people cannot hold an emotional connection without sexualizing it. They confuse intimacy with entitlement. They haven't matured their emotional regulation, especially around attraction. They'll often say, well, I didn't mean anything by it. We're just really close. And then there is ego gratification. People want to feel desired. They want to feel special. They want to be admired. Emotional cheating becomes a mirror to reflect back more of an ideal version of self. Now, this is especially common during midlife or after a blow to somebody's self-esteem. Something will happen, they will connect with somebody, they will be emotionally cheating in their inner world, and they'll say to me, well, they make me feel alive again. Other reasons are boredom and emotional numbness. They may be seeking stimulation. You see, emotional infidelity becomes a form of self-medication. The charge of the secrecy, the flirtation, all of this brings a dopamine hit. People will often say it's harmless fun. It just excites my life a little bit more. But really, this is an avoidance of deeper intimacy within their partnership. Emotional cheating is a displacement mechanism. Rather than go deeper with their partner, they sidestep into safer emotional terrain and create pseudo-intimacy without true vulnerability. Again, saying, well, it's easier to talk to Max, Jane, Lisa, Porrig, whoever. And then there is resentment or passive aggression. So sometimes people are carrying resentment and they're passive aggressive towards their partner because they haven't communicated their needs are not being met, and emotional cheating can be a covert way to punish their partner. See what I could have, or I'll show you kind of energy. They don't want to leave the relationship, they want to leak dissatisfaction. And they tell themselves that this person appreciates them in a way that their partner doesn't. Other reasons are immaturity and entitlement. So in the emotionally underdeveloped individual, they don't understand the impact of emotional affairs. They believe they deserve a little something extra if they're not happy. They don't feel that they did anything wrong. And then you have folk who are addicted to the spark. Some people are simply addicted to the early thrill of new connection. So emotional cheating scratches the itch of early stage intensity, and this is especially true for people who fear stability. They really fear that stability is stagnation, essentially. And they'll always say, I just felt a connection, I couldn't ignore it, I had to follow it. So all of these are about trauma patterns and reenactment. So people may unconsciously seek the emotional high-stakes dynamics of their childhood via emotional affairs. They're recreating triangulation, recreating rejection and abandonment. Chaos and drama feel like love. And they'll say over and over again, I don't know why I do this, it just happens. And then we have people who have difficulty with incomplete endings. They haven't emotionally left an ex. They have a fantasy of what if. So there's like a constant split loyalty with a part of their heart still elsewhere. And emotional cheating keeps that door ajar. Those are the folk who always say, oh, we just have history. And the final one is testing the waters for exit. So this is the person who's not ready to leave, but they're rehearsing and they're daydreaming about it. They want to see if they'd be wanted by someone else first. It's about an emotional safety net before a breakup. Inwardly, they're saying to themselves, I don't know if this relationship is working for me. And essentially, the emotional cheating is a form of monkey branching. So this is emotional Tarzaning, not letting go of one vine until there's another one to swing to. So this is staying in a relationship while emotionally lining up the next one. They're already forming a new bond, often emotionally and sometimes sexually charged, before exiting the current relationship. So using emotional cheating here as a launch pad to soften or justify the breakup. And then they'll say, well, it just happened so fast. We were already over before I met them. No, I say you were already gone. You just hadn't physically left yet. So why is monkey branching emotional cheating? Well, the person is investing emotional energy in someone else before being emotionally or relationally available to their partner. There is essentially deceit by omission or outright lying about the nature of the new connection. And it robs their current partner of clarity, closure, and honesty. So why do people do this? Well, they're terrified of being alone. They have a need for constant emotional scaffolding. They want to avoid facing the grief or moral responsibility of ending a relationship cleanly. They essentially need a soft place to land, even if it's built on betrayal. And what's at the psychodynamic root of this? Well, it's often tied to early abandonment fears, poor individuation, or emotional dependency. Some have never been emotionally alone ever, and they confuse presence with worth, so they cling to the next person to avoid collapsing. And this causes devastation for both the left partner and the new one who was the rebound, even if they're idealized. The long-term guilt and shame masks so very much, and it looks like somebody's moving on fast. But internally there's fragmentation because they didn't actually end anything, they just escaped. So there's lots of different ways people emotionally cheat. These can occur with or without physical intimacy. Emotional cheating is fundamentally about the redirection of emotional intimacy, a person's energy, their loyalty away from their primary partner. And the essential key to remember is they're doing it covertly. So this includes texting or messaging someone with intimacy, sharing private thoughts, vulnerabilities, dreams, frustrations, saying things that you haven't said to your partner, emotional flirtation, inside jokes, memes, good morning and good night texts. And a big alarm bell is if somebody is deleting messages or hiding the conversation. If they're emotionally confiding, if they're offloading life stressors, emotional highs, lows, or personal wounds onto someone else instead of their partner, if they're saying, well, they just get me, or I can talk to them more easily than I can my partner, there is a bit of a problem. So maintaining a special friend, one-on-one closeness with a colleague, an old flame, or a new friend where emotional boundaries are very porous. And the key thing to remember is if you're feeling butterflies when they text or comment, you've got an issue to look at. So you can't call it harmless if you're prioritizing somebody else's opinions, time, or presence over that of your partner. And then in this day and age, we have social media intimacy. So people liking, commenting, engaging in flirtatious and suggestive interactions online, or secretly following accounts for romantic validation, for attention, for titillation. This all creates an emotional feed or an ego supply. Then we have rekindling with exes, without transparency. So reopening emotional ties with curiosity and reminiscing about the past, maintaining private conversations with an ex under the guise of we're just friends now, is you lying to yourself. And then we have Therapeutic mentorship and emotional dependency. This one's key as well. It's not healthy to become emotionally reliant on a therapist, mentor, or coach in a way that replaces intimacy with one's partner. So, this is really key, and I can't leave it out either. Then we have fantasizing about someone specific while with your partner. So, sexually or romantically idealizing someone else during moments of deep connection, or using imagination as an escape hatch from real intimacy, these are things to reflect upon as well. As is comparing your partner unfavorably to someone else, noticing every single quality your partner lacks, for example, and seeking that energy elsewhere, or creating a relationship triangle in your head. This needs reflection. People often use someone as a proxy for unmet needs. If you're emotionally leaning on someone else to meet what you're not expressing or negotiating with your partner, whether it's admiration, validation, a desire to be seen, that needs contemplation. Or if you're playing out romance via fantasy conversations, if you're imagining being with someone else and acting differently than you do with your partner, or if you're creating romantic connection in your head but not owning it out loud, you might want to look at that. So, a common one is using work or projects to bond romantically. If an individual is developing an intense co working relationship under the guise of collaboration, and if emotional intimacy grows through late night work hours spent at the office, or problem solving with a colleague, engaging in mutual admiration, again, this needs to be reflected upon. And especially if you're hiding the connection. If you're hiding it, there's usually a reason. If you're not telling your partner that you're meeting Anne or Tom, or lying about the nature of the contact, you definitely need to look at that. So, who exactly emotionally cheats? What are the archetypes and what are the patterns? Well, firstly, we have the discontented partner. That's someone who feels emotionally neglected or misunderstood. They justify the connection because their partner doesn't meet their emotional needs. Secondly, we have the validation addict, someone who constantly needs affirmation, attention, and wants to feel desirable. They often keep several emotional flings going at once without ever seeing them as cheating. The third one is the avoidant person. They fear too much closeness with their actual partner, so they like to keep things low risk emotionally, and they look for a safer person as their real go-to. Fourth, we have the idealizer. Well, they live in an utter fantasy land within their mind. They have a tendency to project perfect traits onto someone else, especially new acquaintances or completely unavailable people. Fifth, we have the performer. That's the individual who curates intimacy with others to feel admired or important. They usually use charm or intellect to form bonds that feel intense, but essentially they're quite vacuous and hollow. The sixth type is the rescuer caretaker type. These individuals become overly involved in helping or supporting someone vulnerable. They build intimacy through feeling needed emotionally. The seventh is the passive aggressive. They outright sabotage intimacy in their relationship by leaking their emotional availability elsewhere. This does not end well. It just bleeds their attention onto something else. They never end things, they never speak up, and they have a deep need to really look at their communication skills rather than act out passive aggressively. They need to learn how to name it. The eighth type is the rebellious person. Cheating becomes a quiet act of revenge or reclaiming power. They might have felt controlled, dismissed, or unseen in their childhood. The ninth type is, well, the wanderer in waiting. They always have one foot out the door. Emotional cheating for them becomes a stepping stone into the next relationship. They're the monkey brancher. And finally, we have the trauma bonded seeker. That's the individual drawn to drama, chaos, danger, familiar dysfunction. If they're not in an episode of EastEnders within their life, they're busy looking to create it. And emotional cheating for them is a way to recreate old emotional patterns that make them feel alive. So in this episode, I'm going to cover everything. The signs if you're being emotionally cheated on, how to confront somebody doing it, the impact on both the cheater and the partner. I'll cover everything. So stay with me. And for anyone who's ever being unwittingly emotionally cheated with, I'll cover that too, because it often looks like you're someone else's soft place to land. You may be the emotional holding tank for where emotion goes when they can't or won't bring things to their partner. You're not the boyfriend, you're not the girlfriend, but they could be lighting up when you message. And oftentimes these people have no clue. They have no clue until much, much later. So while this happens to both sexes, I do see that it somehow skews more towards men, especially those who don't have many safe, emotionally intelligent outlets. They often seek refuge in the comfort of a woman who listens without judgment, sees them clearly and feels kind of clean, but they do so without considering the impact on their partner. So it's really, really important to be so incredibly boundaried, or else you'll end up being energetically fed off. If you feel that something's off with somebody or you feel confused, put down stricter boundaries. If it leaves you with a false sense of intimacy or you feel that something is amiss, it's really important to reassess and reaffirm your boundaries. I'm not saying that men are incapable of depth. What I'm saying is that some are not conditioned to hold depth without confusing it for attraction or for ownership. So this is kind of evolutionary psychology. It's cultural in many ways and psychological all at the same time. Because women are raised to tolerate emotional nuance, we sit with emotional complexity. We can feel admiration, love, grief, desire, and have limits all at the same time and not act out. Well, healthy, emotionally mature women. We know how to hold intimacy without crossing the line. So, from an evolutionary perspective and a cultural one, men are raised to collapse emotional intensity into one or two outcomes, either sex or shame. So when they do feel deep emotion with a woman who isn't their woman, it creates a sense of internal chaos. Many cannot metabolize that charge, so they either pull away, convert it into flirtation, try to turn it into something, ghost or deny, or hide it from everyone, including themselves. And it's not healthy. It's really and truly not healthy. So before I go through all of these, I also want to say, okay, that I don't want this episode to fuel paranoia. I just want to spark clarity, not control. So not every friendship is a threat. Let's just say that out straight. Emotional cheating is not the same as having deep, respectful, boundaried friendships with people of the opposite sex, or anyone for that matter. Lots of people have plenty of opposite sex friends, and not once do they cross a line. Why? Well, because integrity isn't about who you're talking to, it's about how you're talking, why you're talking, and what you'd do if your partner was watching the conversation play out in real time. Mature friendships are honest, open, and woven into the fabric of your life. They're not hidden in side chats or late night texts with the screen turned away. And the difference is felt, the difference is lived, and deep down you already know which side of the line you're on. So, in real friendship, the kind rooted in respect, transparency, and clean boundaries, this is never a threat to a relationship. It's often a sign of maturity. The difference isn't always in the content of what's said, it's in the tone, the timing, the intention, and the transparency. You see, emotional cheating hides, it edits, it builds a secret parallel world. Real friendship never does that. It's woven into your life openly. It doesn't need explaining, defending, or deleting. And deep down, everyone involved knows the difference. So if you're checking your messages twice before showing someone, you're not having a friendship, you're having an affair in disguise in your own head. And the reason emotional cheating hurts so much is because it's built on intimacy without accountability. It's the secret little world that someone builds with someone else and then tells the person, their partner, that they're overreacting for noticing a blueprint. It leaves the partner questioning their instincts, doubting their worth, and trying to be chill with everything while they notice their partner's emotional energy is circling someone else like a moth to a flame. There's nothing overt, no hotel receipts, no headline moments, just the slow, hollow ache of knowing that there's a part of them that's missing in action, that used to turn to the partner and it doesn't anymore. And the reason emotional cheating can really, really cut to the core is that it grows quietly behind closed doors, inwardly in somebody's fantasy world, while their partner is shrinking and doubting themselves. There's nothing dramatic here, no reveal, no scandal, no confession, just the slow erosion of closeness. This quiet ache of realizing, well, okay, you don't happen to be the person that they turn to first. And that's dangerous. So let's look at the different reasons people emotionally cheat now. So the first one is unmet emotional needs in the primary relationship. So that's, oh, they listen to me. Oh, they make me feel interesting again. Oh, we just click, we connect. That's all it is. No, 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 that's not all it is. What's happening here is emotional outsourcing. So someone's quietly shifting their inner life away from their partner because it feels easier, safer, or more gratifying somewhere else. This is one of the most common reasons people emotionally cheat, and the most self-righteous, because it's framed as a reaction to something lacking. Oh, well, I wouldn't be doing this if my partner didn't X, Y, Z. But let's be honest, emotional needs go unmet in every long-term relationship at times. Loneliness, disconnection, and flatness are normal seasons in a close bond with longevity. They're not emergencies that justify replacement. So, what separates maturity from betrayal is how those unmet needs are handled. Do you name them in the relationship? Do you risk the awkward, vulnerable conversation? Or do you slide into a comfortable connection elsewhere and pretend it's harmless? When someone says, I can just be myself with them, they're often not realizing the truth. They're getting to be a version of themselves that doesn't have to deal with conflict, routine, or reality. They're outsourcing intimacy to avoid facing the work that real connection demands. And here is the kicker. The new emotional connection feels so alive precisely because it's untested. No dishes, no mortgages, no mirror, just admiration, just ease and novelty. But admiration without responsibility is not intimacy. That is pure fantasy. So yes, unmet emotional needs are real, but choosing to meet them secretly elsewhere doesn't solve the problem. It just transfers it. And eventually it repeats. And here's something no one talks about enough. The person being emotionally cheated with is often the last to know. They may not be flirting. They may not even be interested. They're just being themselves, kind, present, emotionally available. And if someone starts leaning on them in ways that feel deeper than friendship but are never named, well, it's easy to mistake this for connection. Essentially, they've unwittingly become someone else's escape hatch, their confidant, their private emotional world. Sometimes people know it and sometimes they don't. If you're tangled up in someone else's unfinished business, take a step back. You'll feel it in your bones. Emotional cheating isn't always a two-person crime, but if you're really attuned to yourself, you should pick up on it pretty fast. put the boundaries down and take a step back. Sometimes one person is using the other to avoid facing what they haven't dealt with at home. Other times, yes, it's co-created. And I'll handle that in another episode, the kind of person that engages in that behavior with somebody they know is in a deep and healthy partnership. So if it's a case of a Walter Mitty and the emotional affair only happens in the mind of the person doing the cheating, it's all about projection, it's fantasy. They take someone who was kind to them once, someone who listened a little too well, and build a whole internal love story around it. It's about escapism. The other person might be completely oblivious, living their life, keeping things boundaried, while they're being mentally rehearsed into a starring role in someone else's emotional theatre. I've seen it happen. And this is where emotional cheating gets very slippery. It doesn't always require a mutual bond. Sometimes it's just one person pouring unmet longing into a made-up connection that feels real because it reflects what they want to feel, not what actually exists. And then when the partner picks up on the shift, the emotional withdrawal, the fantasy, the distraction, they get told they're imagining things, but they're not. They're sensing a truth that hasn't yet been spoken. Something sacred has already moved out of reach. So in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to go deep on the remaining 9 reasons that people emotionally cheat. And I'm going to dissect the soulmate fantasy, the most romantic lie anyone will ever tell themselves. So thanks for listening to Soul Path Alchemy. Remember, fantasy isn't intimacy, validation isn't connection, and attention, no matter how intoxicating, is not the same as being known. So if this stirred something, sit with it, don't run, don't rationalize. Just sit and breathe and reflect. This is where repair begins. So I'm Annie. Thank you for listening, and you'll hear part 2 tomorrow. Have a great day.